question is why? Why did the attacks on Pearl Harbor occur? What led Japan to the point where they would attack the United States? The enormous tension between the countries began with the United States placing economic sanctions on Japan as punishment for what they had done. And what they had done was, they were occupying an airfield in Indonesia. The stationing was a great vantage point for the Japanese army, which led to America freezing Japanese assets such as gas and oil. America was very isolated and not engaging in the war, but Japan had to expand into the South Pacific, and America was in the middle of their game plan. So Japan decided to surprise attack the United States Pacific Fleet, which is based in Pearl Harbor. These attacks were very devastating and destroyed more than 300 aircrafts, also sinking 4 battleships. The attacks killed close to 2,400 Americans. America was then engaged in the war and attacked Japan at Midway and later bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki did enough damage for Japan to surrender. We now know why the attacks occurred, and we know how the United States retaliated. During the retaliation from the United States, we have to ask another question. What was America doing with Japanese Americans? America started placing Japanese Americans into internment camps. The bombing occurred on December 7th, and the internment camps were signed into executive order on February 19th by President Roosevelt. The internment camps were created to protect the United States from other attacks, as they believed some of the Japanese Americans to be spies. The government put notices up requiring all Japanese descents to register with the government. The government giving long paperwork to be filled out for the Japanese Americans to be migrated and moved into a different location. The United States government did help with relocation and the assets the Japanese Americans did have in selling them or protecting them while they are in the relocation camps. The army using whatever they could find to move fleets of families and their belongings. While moving them to assembly centers to later be placed into camps, the Japanese Americans were very cooperative with the US government. Many Japanese Americans were very cooperative because they believed it is their due diligence to follow what the US government has told them to do as they are United States citizens. The Japanese Americans left behind their shops and their homes, many which benefited their whole livelihoods in the United States. The concept of internment camps do not share a relation with the concept of concentration camps used in Nazi Germany, but the internment camps do relate closely with jail. This affected many people. Almost 120,000 people with Japanese descent, of whom the majority were American citizens. America became very anti-Japanese very quickly, most definitely due to the enormous tensions the war had caused them. For Japanese Americans, it has become even harder to live a normal life now that they have to live in a small space along with thousands of other Japanese Americans. Not only did the United States do this to the Japanese descents, but Canada and Mexico followed in the United States' footsteps by removing them and sending them to the United States into internment camps. The camps were its own town. They included schools, post offices, and work facilities. Each prison camp was surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. The camps were overcrowded and provided poor living conditions. Residents used common bathroom and laundry facilities, but hot water was usually limited, relating more and more to the setting of a jail. Children played sports and engaged in various activities. People at the camps tried to establish some sense of community, and many people lived in the camps together with their families. There was still an enormous amount of tension between the US and Japan at this point, before Japan had even surrendered, and before the United States had bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States government had announced that the internment camps would all be closed by the end of 1945. Living in the United States was now even harder than when they were in the internment camps. Now the Japanese Americans are being discriminated against on a daily basis, and they also are living in a country that wiped out half of their native land. America faced backlash then and still are today. Protests still take place in this day and age, with survivors of the internment camps making their voices heard. Speaking out against America's actions during this time is still present today. Satsuki Ima, a former child incarceree, has been very vocal lately.
75 years ago, 120,000 of us were removed from our homes and forcefully incarcerated in prison camps across the country. We're here today to protest the repetition of history. We were in American concentration camps. We were held under indefinite detention. We were without due process of law. We were charged without any evidence of being a threat to national security, that we were an unassimilable race, that we would be a threat to the economy. We hear these exact words today regarding innocent people seeking asylum in this country.
America has been trying to right this wrong. First, they gave reparation to each person who was incarcerated. The reparations were ordered by President Reagan in 1988, and it paid $20,000 to each person who was living. America knows what it did was wrong.